From front squats to back squats to goblet squats, there are a ton of squat variations out there that you have probably done. But one that you may not have done, and it's gonna make all those other squat variations better and make you stronger at the traditional squat, is something called the Zercher squat. Now, the Zercher squat is having a moment right now. We see a lot of Zercher moves on social media. It is not just a social media parlor trick though. It's not one of those moves. It's actually a move that can make you stronger. It's gonna help your squat, and it's gonna really help you with your core bracing when you're doing all of your squat variations. Now, the Zercher squat was created in the 1930s by a strongman named Ed Zercher. And his whole idea was based around strongman training. What he was trying to do was make himself stronger for that. So the Zercher squat and the idea of the Zercher is less just something that applies to the squat and something that we can actually apply to all of our lower body lifts. It's essentially a way to grasp the weight, a way to grasp the barbell in a different way that's going to challenge our torso differently, and it's going to challenge our upper body differently. It's going to change our stability pattern a little bit. With the Zercher, we're instead going to hold the weight in the crooks of our elbows. And this instantly changes a couple things in terms of where we're going to feel the squat most. We have instantly taken a little bit of spinal compression off of our torso. Normally when we're doing a squat, we've got that bar on our spine, and that is to some level pressing together our spine, and we have to know how to counter that. When we've got the weight in the crooks of our elbows, our squat is now freed up. Our spine can move, it can bend, and it can flex, and it can move a little bit more naturally. Now the load is a lot closer to our abs, it is a lot closer to our midline, so it's going to challenge us in a different way from a stability standpoint. The great thing about the Zercher squat is it's going to teach you and force you how to brace. When we have that load on our back, the main lever we're working with from an upper body standpoint is going to be our spine. We have to keep our torso nice and rigid the entire time. Now we have a lever where the load is going to potentially shift a little bit away as we lower into the squat. And that load is also going to challenge another muscle group that sort of gets challenged on our front and back squats, but doesn't truly get the challenge that it's going to on the Zercher, and that is our mid-back muscles. Your rhomboids, your rotator cuff muscles, and your upper spinal extensors are all gonna have to be on throughout the life of each set of Zercher squats, and they're gonna get a ton of work. So this is a really, really great way to learn to brace, and it is a really, really underrated way to get a mid-back pump while you're training legs. What this is not is a biceps exercise. Yes, we are holding a load in the crooks of our elbows, and yes, that means we're flexing our biceps to some extent, but two things are not happening that are not gonna allow us to really grow our biceps when we're doing Zercher squats. One, our biceps are never changing length. We're just staying in that flex position. And two, we don't actually have a real lever on our biceps. So we've gone into elbow flexion, but the load is right at our elbow. It is not being challenged because it is not out in front of our forearms. It is not anywhere close to our wrists. So we're not really gonna get much out of this for our biceps. You can pretend you're getting a biceps pump and you can tell people you're training your biceps because technically you are, but if you wanna really train biceps, just go do some biceps curls. We're doing the Zercher squat and we're gonna learn how to do it now because it's gonna really beef up your legs and it's gonna really attack your mid-back, and it's gonna teach you how to brace so it makes all your squats better. So before we get into how to execute the Zercher squat, the question is, do you need to do it? Is the Zercher squat for you? If you fall into one of three camps, then it's an exercise that you're gonna wanna do. The first camp is if you're struggling with your squat form, period, if you're having a lot of trouble bracing. A lot of times when we do our back squats and our front squats, it's really easy for us to overarch our back or to completely ignore our core. We can kind of cheat our way through it. It's not gonna yield the best squat performance, but we can get through it without really bracing our core. That cannot happen on the Zercher squat. Because that load is pulling us forward, our mid-back has to fire up, our abs have to fire up. In fact, when I do Zerchers, very often I feel the most in my abs right after a set because that's how much I really have to contract my core as I'm working through a Zercher. So if you are struggling to learn to brace during your squat and you want to figure that out, then you should be doing some Zerchers in your training. If you go to a cycle of that for say 4 to 6 weeks and then go back to a back or front squat, expect your back and front squat to be much better. The second group of people who should do Zerchers, and it is absolutely mandatory that you do them, is those who are training for strongman. If you are training for strongman, you are constantly picking things up in front of you and you're picking up heavy loads in front of you. So there's a lot of use for both the Zercher position and the Zercher squat. So if you're a strongman, This is mandatory, and you probably know that already because you're 10 times my size. The last group that should be doing the Zercher is anyone who is just bored with their regular squats. We have done a lot of back squats and front squats and goblet squats. All of those load us up high. Sometimes just getting away from that can be a little bit of fun. The one group that should not worry about the Zercher squat is anybody worried about this whole it's a really functional move thing. You're gonna see this on Instagram all the time. They're gonna show you the Zercher position. They're gonna show you that it's the same as picking up a person. So they're gonna try to tell you that that makes this a great move for anybody who is a firefighter, a police officer, or a paramedic. They're gonna try to tell you those things and make you think that you need to do the Zercher in order to carry humans and in order to carry loads in front of you. The truth is, if you're hitting your traditional squats and your traditional deadlifts and your traditional rows, you have covered all the functions that you need in order to learn how to lift something in front of you, so you will be okay. You do not need to do this as a functional move. That is an Instagram trend, and that is not worth your time. Now for those other three groups, let's get into how to do this. So we have Brett here to help us demo the Zercher squat, and there are two main ways that you can set up for the Zercher squat. One is way more complicated and advanced. If you are very advanced and you've been doing this for a while, you can actually pick the load up from the ground. You'd have to do a Zercher deadlift first to get set, and then you can begin doing your squats. A lot easier and a lot better, especially if we're gonna take this heavy or we're gonna try to push our limits, is to use a rack, and this is the best way if you've never done the Zercher that you should be setting up. The key thing to think about here is going to be rack height, because we're not going to be setting this up like we would a normal barbell front squat or back squat. Instead, we want the rack set at about waist height. This is gonna give you, think about getting the rack, you want the barbell to essentially align with the top of your hips. That's gonna give you plenty of clearance. That way you can set up, you can comfortably set up, because we wanna set up a little bit low, and then all you're gonna have to do after you get set up is you're going to stand up from the rack. So how is Brett going to get himself set up in the rack? All he's gonna really think about doing to get set up, he's going to get low, and you wanna kind of squat down to get into this. He's getting the crooks of his elbows inside that barbell. Now the next day, especially after the first time you've done this, there's a very, very good chance that you'll have a little bit of bruising there. That is normal, and if you wind up Zerchering a lot, what I would suggest is either you do it in long sleeves or you do it in some kind of sleeve, or you can easily put a pad on the barbell. That's another way you can get around it. I actually like to get in a little bit of a stagger stance when I'm in that squat down. Now in this position, a couple things Brett is thinking about. One of the main ones is he wants to make sure that his upper arms are perpendicular with the ground. You don't want to be in too tight and you don't want to be too wide. And then he wants to think about creating external rotation at his shoulder joints. Your shoulders are doing a lot of work in the Zercher in terms of stabilizing and managing that load. He's gonna think about getting his upper arms perpendicular to the ground, but then he's gonna think about almost squeezing his elbows together as if you're in the front rack, if you're doing a front rack kettlebell squat, or if you're really squeezing your elbows together in a goblet squat, we're going for that same tension. Once he has that down, he's gonna get a little bit of tension through his mid-back. You wanna think about keeping that mid-back live. Again, you're just gonna get a lot of work in the Zercher. Last thing he's gonna do, there are two things he can do with his hands. One of them is what he's doing right now, and this is a great thing to do. You can make fists, right? We don't want our hands nice and open. We want our hands active, and we want to be able to create tension. So you want to be able to squeeze your fist nice and tight. That'll help him irradiate through the rest of his body. It's going to give him a much more stable setup. The other option, and this is what I tend to go to, if I'm going heavy on the Zercher, you can clasp your hands together. Again, that's gonna create a lot of tightness. We want to just essentially be able to really squeeze through our hands. It's gonna give us a lot more stability for the Zercher squat. Once he is set up like this, all he's going to do is stand up from the rack. He's gonna brace nice and tight, think rib cage down, and he's gonna stand up from the rack. He's gonna take 2 steps back. That should land him in his squat stance. Whatever your squat stance is for this, you can essentially use that same posture. The only thing we want to be very conscious of is we want to make sure our knees, that we can open them up wider than shoulder width. So he is shoulder width with his shoulders and with his elbows right now. That means when he lowers into the squat, if his knees are too tight, he's not gonna be able to get his maximum squat range of motion, so we're not gonna get the entire benefit of the move. That's why we wanna go maybe a little bit wider than your normal squat stance, depending on what your normal squat stance is. Once you're there, then we are set to execute this Zercher squat. We put a little bit of weight on here. We actually did that for a reason, because it can be very, very deceptive and very easy, and you can get away with a lot when you just have that 45-pound bar. As soon as you start loading the move, and we're gonna see this once Brett lowers into the squat, something is gonna happen, and that's something that we wanna pay attention to. So we wanna demo this with a little bit of load on the bar. The process for going through a rep is very similar to what you would do on your standard squat. So Brett's gonna think about having his weight relatively even between his heels and his big toe. He's gonna think about having a good tripod foot. He's gonna squeeze his shoulder blades, squeeze his glutes in that starting position. He's gonna take a deep breath. He's gonna hold his breath once he does that. And then the reps for this are essentially the exact same as a standard squat. We've just got that really good brace because Brett's holding his breath. So he's gonna lower down into the squat. He's gonna think about pushing his butt back to get that motion started. And then he lowers down and presses back up. Now, the couple things we want to think about as he goes into this lower down, you want to notice a couple things. One, that wide stance for the legs, slightly wider than normal, is key, because as he lowers, he wants to make sure that his elbows are off of his knees. We're trying to make sure that we get that really good and aggressive stretch position in the bottom of our squat. And you can't get that if your elbows are touching your knees. Suddenly we've lost tension somewhere. We've lost tension in our core, or we've lost tension in our thighs, but either way, we're not getting the max benefit of the move. So when he lowers down, he wants to make sure that his elbows are not touching his knees. One thing you can do to help that process is if you squeeze those elbows in nice and tight, then they should be able to essentially fit between your knees. That's one way we can get around that. The other thing you're going to notice is the weight shifts away from his body as he's doing this. When you're doing a heavy Zercher squat, it is not going to stay close to your body, and that is natural, because what's happening as Brett lowers into the squat, let's go into it. He's trying his best to stay upright with his torso, but he's going to get that same forward body lean with his torso ever so slightly that we get on all of our squat variations. So don't be afraid to let the weight shift a little bit forward when that happens on the Zercher squat, and it's actually going to just create a little bit more challenge for your glutes. That is just fine. So let's give them one more rep, Brett. Lowers down, keeps his elbows off of his thighs, lets the weight shift forward. That is also that really good opportunity when that weight shifts forward on the bottom, where his mid back is live and his core has to really stabilize. So that's actually what we're going for in the Zercher squat. What I really like to see people do on the Zercher squat, lower down, Brett, and stay there for 1-2 seconds, come up. So appreciate that chance to really focus on that brace, really focus on your mid back, linger in that bottom position, then come up and squeeze the heck out of your glutes. That is how you execute a Zercher squat. It's gonna make you awesomely strong for all the other squat variations that you do. And again, this is not a move that everybody needs to do, but if you have it in your routine, it's gonna have a ton of utility for building your overall lower body strength and setting you up to squat more. You can use this easily on your leg days as one of your top 2 lifts. Make it something that you're training heavy. Think about doing it for, say, 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps. That's a really great aggressive way that will challenge you and challenge your core as you're doing it. And again, we can load this up just as we would with any of our other squats, whether we're doing a back squat or a front squat. Once you learn the Zercher, you're gonna be able to take it heavy. The other underrated way that you can actually use a Zercher is you can use it on the back end of a lower body day or of a total body day. And we can use it to pile up some really, really good volume to grow our quads and glutes in particular. If you're gonna do it this way, you're gonna leave it for, say, your 3rd or 4th exercise in the workout. You're gonna think about going a little bit lighter. We're gonna go for 3 to 4 sets of anywhere from 12 to 15 reps, focusing on a really good contraction and focusing on constant tension. Maybe you're not even coming up to a full lockout at the very top of your Zercher. It's a really, really great way to attack your quads and attack your glutes. Regardless of how you use the Zercher squat, expect people to look at you in the gym, because this is not a lift that they're gonna see every day. Unlike all the useless Instagram lifts, though, that they don't see every day, this one will actually help get you jacked.